"Send the useless one," the elder said, and no one in the gathered crowd disagreed. Briar Hallow stood at the edge of the ritual circle, with her chin lifted and her hands trembling at her sides, listening to her own extinction being decided in a voice that did not even bother to lower itself with shame. The purification night had come, as it did every 7 years, and the pack needed a symbolic offering to walk into the Whispering Forest and prove the borders were still respected by whatever old power lived beneath those black trees. Everyone knew what walking into that forest actually meant. Nobody had ever come back. Her own mother had gone in 18 years ago with a hunting party of 6, and only silence had ever answered the horns that called them home. Briar had grown up beneath the weight of that silence, the daughter of the woman who failed, the living reminder of a bloodline the pack had quietly decided was cursed, weak, and better forgotten. She had spent her whole life trying to prove she was more than her mother's ending, training harder than anyone, asking for nothing, taking every insult with her spine straight, and it had earned her exactly this: a crowd of familiar faces looking at her like she was already gone. Her father would not meet her eyes. That hurt more than the elder's voice. She searched the circle for him anyway, for one flicker of protest, one hand raised, and found only the low murmur of relief moving through the pack like a held breath finally released. They were glad. They were glad it was her and not their own daughters, their own sons, their own soft and comfortable lives. "I volunteer," Briar said, before anyone could push her forward and make the humiliation complete, because if she was going to walk into that forest, she would at least walk in on her own feet. The elder's mouth twitched, something close to satisfaction, and the crowd parted for her like water refusing to touch something spoiled. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one, because Briar's walk into the dark was only the beginning of everything that was about to change. The forest swallowed sound the moment she crossed the tree line. Briar had expected screaming winds or growling shadows, something that matched the stories told to frighten pups into obedience. But instead, there was only a hush so complete she could hear her own heartbeat pressing against her ribs. The trees here grew wrong, twisted into shapes that seemed to lean toward her as she passed, and threads of pale mist curled low around her ankles, like something breathing. She walked for hours, refusing to let herself run, refusing to give the forest the satisfaction of her fear. Night fell without warning, swallowing the last gray light between one step and the next. And that was when she heard it. A voice low and old, threading itself through the silence like it had been waiting for her specifically. It did not speak in words she recognized at first. It spoke in her own name, the true shape of it, syllables her parents had never taught her because they themselves had never known them. Briar Hallow, daughter of the border, blood of the old pact. She stopped walking. Something in her chest answered the voice before her mind understood what was happening. A warmth uncoiling low in her stomach like an ember finally given air, and beneath her skin something ancient stretched awake for the first time in her entire life. She had always been told the wolf inside her was faint, unreliable, barely worth mentioning next to the strong bloodlines of the pack's favored families, standing in the dark heart of a forest that killed everyone who entered it. She felt that faint thing roar. The presence led her, not with words now, but with a pull behind her sternum, guiding her feet through the twisted trees until the mist thinned, and she found the ruins. Stone walls, half swallowed by roots, arched into what had once clearly been a grand hall, and firelight flickered somewhere deep within it, impossible and inviting in a place that should have held nothing alive. Briar's hand found the small knife at her belt, more from habit than any real belief it would help her, and she stepped through the broken archway with her heart slamming against her throat. He was already watching her when she entered, seated near the fire with the stillness of something that had learned patience the hard way. And even in the low light, Briar felt the air change around him, thick and charged, like standing too close to a coming storm. His eyes, silver as struck flint, tracked her from the doorway with an intensity that made her want to step back and step closer at the same time. "You are the first to make it this far in 15 years, he said, and his voice carried the low rasp of someone who had not used it on another living person in longer than he cared to count. Most who wander in do not survive the first mile. Tell me your name, girl who is not afraid, though I can smell that you are. Briar, she said, refusing to let the tremor in her hands reach her voice. Briar Hallow, and I am not afraid of you. I am afraid of going home. Something shifted behind his eyes at that, an understanding he had not expected to find in a stranger stumbling into his exile. I am Corvin Draven, he said, once the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Now I am simply the thing the Council locked away and called dead so their consciences could rest easier. He rose to his feet, and even in ragged clothing worn thin by years of solitude, he carried himself like a man who had once commanded armies and had not entirely forgotten how. The forest does not simply let people wander through it, Briar Hallow. It chooses. It has been choosing for centuries, and it has rejected every single person who has come here since the day I arrived, myself included at first. Something in your blood answered a call older than either of us. That is not an accident I intend to ignore. He explained over the following days what the forest actually was. Not a curse, not a punishment, but a boundary sealed by an ancient pact between the first wolves and the spirit of the wilderness itself. A pact written in blood by founding bloodlines the current pack had long since forgotten how to honor. The council that exiled Corvin had done so out of fear, convincing the pack that his refusal to bow to their growing corruption made him dangerous, unstable, unfit to rule, when the truth was simpler and uglier. He had seen what Lady Cassia Voss was doing behind closed doors, siphoning pack resources into her own hidden coffers, poisoning alliances that had taken generations to build. And when he moved to expose her, she moved first, painting him as the threat and exiling him to a forest everyone assumed would finish the job quietly. 15 years he had survived here alone, learning its secrets, waiting for a reason to hope again. Briar's arrival was the first reason he had been given in a very long time. She should have been terrified of him. Instead, she found herself drawn back to that fire every evening, listening to him speak of the old pact, watching the careful way he moved through the ruins like a man rebuilding a version of himself, piece by piece. He taught her to read the forest's moods, the way certain trees only bent toward danger, the way the mist thickened before a threat and thinned before safety. In turn, she taught him small things about the world outside, how the pack had changed under Cassia Voss's regency, how fear had replaced loyalty as the thing holding the territory together. Neither of them spoke of what was growing between them, not directly, though it lived in the careful distance he kept when they sat too close, in the way her pulse betrayed her whenever his gaze lingered a moment too long. You flinch every time someone raises their voice near you, Corvin said one night, watching her across the fire with an expression she could not quite name. Someone taught you that flinching kept you safe. I would like to know who. Everyone, Briar said simply. My whole life, everyone. He did not offer empty comfort. He simply reached out, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted to, and set his hand over hers where it rested on the cold stone floor. You do not have to flinch here, he said. Nothing in this forest wants to hurt you. I certainly do not. The warmth of his hand against hers felt like the first safe thing she had touched in years, and something in her chest, the same ember the forest had woken, burned a little brighter. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below, because the deeper Briar went into the forest's secrets, the closer she came to a truth that would shake the entire pack to its foundation. The awakening came on the 7th night. Briar had been practicing the shift Corvin was slowly teaching her to control, the wolf beneath her skin no longer faint but insistent, clawing to be let loose after a lifetime of suppression. When the ruins around them began to hum with a low golden light that seemed to rise directly out of the stone floor, Corvin went very still, his breath catching in a way she had never heard from him before. That symbol beneath your feet, he said quietly, pointing to markings carved into the ancient floor that Briar had never noticed until the light traced them awake, is the sigil of the founding bloodline. The family that sealed the original pact with the forest itself. I have lived in these ruins for 15 years, and it has never once lit for me. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he has been waiting his whole life to understand. It is lighting for you. The truth unfolded slowly after that, pulled from fragments of old carvings, half-remembered stories Corvin had gathered over years of exile, and a final vivid vision the forest itself granted Briar in a dream so real she woke gasping. Her mother had not died failing to cross the forest 18 years ago. Her mother had crossed it successfully, had spoken with the very presence that now spoke to Briar, and had been given a choice: to return and claim the ancient authority the bloodline carried, or to protect her infant daughter from a council that would see that authority as a threat to be eliminated, rather than honored. Her mother had chosen protection. She had walked back out of the forest changed, had let the pack believe the mission had failed, and cost the lives of everyone involved, and had spent the rest of her days quietly making sure Briar grew up invisible, unremarkable, beneath the notice of people who might otherwise have hurt her to keep an inconvenient bloodline from ever rising again. The exhaustion in every guarded thing her mother had ever said suddenly made sense. She had not been ashamed of Briar. She had been terrified for her. Which means the pack did not send you here to die because you were worthless, Corvin said, watching the understanding land across her face like a physical blow. They sent you here because on some buried level, they were afraid of exactly what you are. And the forest has been waiting 15 years to give the true heir of the old pact a reason to come home and take back what belongs to her. Briar's hands shook. Not from fear this time, but from something closer to rage. A lifetime of quiet cruelty reframed in an instant, as fear wearing the mask of contempt. They let me believe I was nothing, she said. My whole life. You were never nothing, Corvin said, and the low certainty in his voice settled something in her that years of trying to earn approval never had. You were simply waiting for someone willing to see you clearly. I intend to be that someone, for as long as you will allow it. The mate bond, when it finally surfaced between them, did not arrive as some sudden lightning strike the old stories promised. It arrived slow and undeniable, built from every quiet evening by the fire, every careful hand offered across the dark. Every moment Corvin chose patience over possession, and let Briar find her own way toward trust, rather than demanding it. When she finally leaned into him beneath the golden hum of the awakened sigil, and let herself be held without flinching, the forest itself seemed to exhale around them, mist parting overhead to reveal a sky thick with stars. Neither of them had seen so clearly in years. I am not asking you to stay hidden with me forever, Corvin murmured against her hair, his arms steady around her. I am asking you to walk back out of this forest beside me, and take back everything that was stolen from both of us. There were harder nights too. Nights when the weight of everything Briar had learned threatened to crush the fragile peace she had found in the ruins. She woke once from a dream of her mother's face, tear-streaked and resolute, choosing silence over safety, and found herself sitting alone by the dying fire long before dawn, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to hold together a version of her past that no longer made any sense. Corvin found her there without being called, settling beside her without a word, offering nothing but steady presence until her breathing slowed. Grief does not follow a schedule, he said eventually. You are allowed to mourn a mother who is still alive, because the woman who raised you and the woman who could have been are not the same person. And you lost one of them the moment you learned the truth. His understanding surprised her every time, a gentleness she had not expected from a man the world called dangerous, and she found herself leaning into it more readily with each passing week. The old instinct to protect herself from disappointment slowly loosening its grip. There was fear, too, honest and unglamorous, the kind neither of them tried to hide from the other. Briar admitted one evening that the thought of standing before the pack again made her stomach twist with a dread deeper than anything the forest itself had ever inspired. Because monsters in the dark were easier to face than the familiar faces of people who had once looked straight through her. Corvin did not offer easy reassurance. Instead, he told her about his own fear the day the council turned against him, the humiliation of being marched out of a hall he had ruled for a decade, while former allies studied their feet, rather than meet his eyes. Fear does not disappear simply because you find your power, he said. It only stops being the thing that decides what you do next. Briar held on to those words longer than almost anything else he ever told her, turning them over in the quiet hours, letting them become armor she carried into every training session that followed. They trained for the confrontation that followed, Briar learning to call her wolf fully for the first time, feeling the ancestral strength of the founding bloodline settle into her bones with each passing day, while Corvin taught her the political architecture of the council she would need to face. Lady Cassia Voss would not surrender the regency without a fight, and she had spent 15 years consolidating power, building loyalty through fear and strategic marriages, ensuring that anyone who might challenge her either owed her a debt or feared her retaliation too much to speak against her. Returning would mean walking back into a den of manufactured loyalty and forcing the truth into the light in front of the entire pack, with no guarantee anyone would believe a girl they had already thrown away once. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because what waited for Briar and Corvin at the edge of the forest was about to change everything the pack believed about strength, worth, and who truly deserved to lead them. They walked out of the whispering forest together at dawn, exactly as the borders opened for the seasonal renewal ceremony, and the sight of them stopped the gathered pack cold. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass, disbelief curdling into confusion, as recognition slowly dawned on older faces who remembered a king they had been told was dead. Lady Cassia Voss stood at the head of the ceremonial dais in robes of deep violet, her composure a practiced mask that did not quite hide the flicker of alarm crossing her features, as Corvin Draven walked toward her with the quiet authority of a man reclaiming what was always his. Beside him walked Briar Hallow, the girl the pack had sacrificed to a forest they assumed would erase her quietly, standing now with a golden light beginning to trace faint markings along her collarbone, visible proof of a bloodline no one could argue against. "This is impossible," Cassia said, her voice carrying just enough tremor to betray her. "The forest does not release its offerings. It certainly does not release exiled traitors." "The forest released exactly who it chose to release," Corvin answered, his tone level and cold enough to cut. "And it seems the old pact recognizes bloodlines far better than this council ever did. Tell me, Cassia, how many years did you spend convincing everyone I was dangerous while quietly emptying the northern treasury into accounts with your family name attached? I have had 15 years alone with nothing to do but remember every detail." The crowd's murmur shifted, uncertain now, watching as evidence Corvin had gathered over years of careful thought was laid before elders too shocked to interrupt. But it was Briar who silenced the final wave of doubt, stepping forward as the golden markings along her skin brightened in direct answer to the ancestral stone, set into the ceremonial dais itself, an heirloom everyone had assumed was purely decorative. The stone flared to life in recognition, casting light across the stunned faces of a pack that had called her useless only days before. "My mother did not fail to cross that forest 18 years ago," Briar said, her voice steady despite the roar of her own heartbeat. "She succeeded, and she chose to protect me instead of claiming a birthright that would have made me a target. I am done being invisible to protect people who never once tried to protect me." She turned to face the elder who had first called her useless, watching the color drain from his face as the ancestral light continued to pulse along her skin, like a verdict rendered by something far older and far more honest than any council vote. "You sent me into that forest hoping I would disappear. Instead, I found the truth you all buried, and I found the king you exiled to hide your own corruption." Lady Cassia Voss did not go quietly, not at first, reaching for old alliances and half-formed threats, but the pack around her had already begun to shift, elders murmuring apologies too late to matter, warriors kneeling toward the ancestral light rather than the woman who had ruled them through fear. In the end, it was not violence that ended her reign, but exposure. Records Corvin had carried out of exile in careful memory, now confirmed by pack accountants too frightened of the glowing proof before them to lie any further. Cassia Voss was stripped of her regency before the sun fully rose, escorted from the territory with what remained of her dignity intact, only because Corvin insisted on mercy, rather than the punishment the crowd demanded. She built her power on fear, he told the pack, his hand finding Briar's without hesitation now. No longer hidden. We will not build what comes next the same way. The renewal ceremony that followed was unlike any the pack had witnessed in generations, no longer a symbolic sacrifice offered to appease an old forest, but a true recognition ceremony joining the returned Alpha King to the heir of the founding bloodline. Their bond sealed before the entire territory beneath a sky finally clear of the fear Cassia Voss had cultivated for 15 years. Briar's father stood at the edge of the crowd throughout it all, unable to meet her eyes even now. And when the ceremony ended, she walked to him anyway, because whatever he had failed to be, she refused to let his failure define the woman she had become. I forgive you, she said quietly, but I will not forget what silence costs. Do better for whoever comes after me. Months later, with the pack rebuilding under leadership that finally matched its old ideals, Briar stood again at the edge of the whispering forest, no longer as an offering but as its rightful keeper. The bond between herself and Corvin steady and unshaken beside her. The trees no longer looked twisted to her eyes. They looked like home, the first place that had ever truly seen her, and the man beside her the first person who had chosen her without needing a reason. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. And tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?